Welcome to Cultivated Live for Friday, July 19th. I've been on the road. I think it's the 19th. My name is Jay Rosenthal. I'm the co-founder of Cultivated Media, the host of this program, Cultivated Live. Since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information every day through our daily newsletter, Cultivated Daily, and you can find that at cultivated.news. We do that through this daily live stream, Cultivated Live. So subscribe to our newsletter, get us on LinkedIn, find us on YouTube to get all the stuff you need to know. I am joined today by LJ Dawson, the Editor-in-Chief of the Outlaw Report. In our newsletter today, you will have seen her story this week about what is happening in DC. LJ, welcome.
Hey Jay, how's it going this morning?
Good for me, better for me than it sounds like some of the applicants to be processors, manufacturers, and growers, I guess, in DC. I read your story this week. What is going on with the slow pace of approval? Well, not necessarily approvals, but getting these things off the ground.
Yeah, so in DC, we're going through a medical cannabis market expansion. And the first part of that process was that our regulatory agency, ABCA, opened up a set of licensing periods for social equity and standard cultivators and manufacturers. And this was a really exciting thing last year. They wanted to do it before they opened retail application periods up. The idea was to get all these cultivators and manufacturers up and going, so they had time to produce new products. So by the time the retail stores were opening, we had no worries about any supply issues because we're going through an extreme market expansion for our shops in the city, and it didn't work. So a lot of these cultivators and manufacturers were given conditional licenses. I'm not sure, you may know if other states have done that, but conditional licenses basically said, you don't have to submit all your paperwork. We'll ask you to submit a few things. And if that checks out, we'll award you a conditional license. And that conditional license gave these licensees 12 months to basically get their stuff together and get a location, get all their information submitted. And this was 12 months from the date that they were approved by the board. So not when they submitted their application, but when they were awarded a conditional license. And a bunch of people have been awarded conditional licenses, manufacturers and cultivators, which is great. We had almost 120, over 120 combined of the two categories. However, less than 5% of those by today have actually moved through the licensing period at any point, and only one has actually received a license, and they're not even open yet. And this is 12 months after these license periods started, and many of these people were approaching their cutoff, that if they didn't get this done in 12 months, that they lost their conditional license.
And so there's a couple things happening here. It sounds like a limited number of those got approved to even do anything. And then many of the ones that were approved, only one, like it's hard to open. Before we came on, you were talking, I was asking sort of why. And a lot of it has to do, I guess, with, part of it, the actual size, geography of DC, also sort of DC land use. And then explain sort of that pyramid of why it's hard to find the right place to do this.
Absolutely. So we have many factors going into this. The first one is that DC is a little less than 70 square miles total. And so we have a ton of people, businesses. We have a whole slew of land that's actually federal. Obviously, the White House, the Capitol, all of that. There's not people living on that. There's not businesses being there. So we have a lot of just things stuck in this 70 square miles. And one of the issues with that is that DC has significantly less zoned space for any industrial location. So that's any industrial manufacturing, cannabis or not. And so there's a lack of space. There's a lack of appropriately zoned space. And we can talk about some of the other issues that have come up in that zoning. There's also a banking issue, right? So the same thing that any cannabis industry member is going to experience, whether it's New York or California, is that if you're looking for property to rent or to buy, mostly to rent, if you're working with anyone who is a big developer who doesn't control their own money, they could probably be working with federally backed loans. And you are a high risk business. You're also a cannabis business that's still federally legal. And so they're going to say no. They don't want to work with you. The second thing is that if they can work with you, they're going to get the wind that you're a cannabis business. And there's a huge misunderstanding across the nation that these cannabis businesses are just raking it in, and they're not. Newsflash, they're not. In the legal setting, they're not. And so we've actually talked to people who had submitted information, they had talked to landlords, and then things came up, such as them being a cannabis business, their investors having significantly more funds than the people thought, and they've actually either asked them to pay a significantly higher price than they would a normal business to lease the spot, or agreed to other extraneous, arduous contract details.
That would make no sense for any business, right?
Exactly. Or they've upcharged them. They've upcharged them on a selling price. And so we already have very few buildings. I mean, we're talking under 10 buildings that would be available, potentially under our estimates, that would be available, industrially zoned, available. And that's not even including the ones that are banking, that would be available because they're available due to banking. And so it's just incredibly difficult to find any space in DC. And then on top of that, you have people working with investors who want to see a certain number that makes it worth it for them to invest. And we might be looking at a 5,000 square foot facility, which to them, it's not worth it, right? There's numbers you have to do and meet as cultivators. Manufacturers, not as much, but especially as cultivators, that if you're asking for investors to put money, they're just going to choose a different state or a different area. And Maryland's right next to us, and they have a surplus of space, right? They have rural areas with industrial zoning where people can grow cannabis for cheap. And all of this puts a crunch on the cultivators, and then the people that are allowed to actually get through or the price rises on the cannabis that hits the consumer.
Right. And it's such some of those issues are issues everywhere, but there is a uniqueness to DC that is like the space crunch, the federal government actually owning tons of land, other big landowners, and the limited number of industrial or light industrial actually zoned land. In addition to that, those ones that are federally owned by federally backed, it just compounds.
Yeah.
And if you are looking to grow a business in the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, like those other two states, certainly Maryland, excess in light industrial or industrial, there's actually agricultural land, it's just there are other places to do business, much to the detriment of patients and consumers in DC. Is there a solution, aside from federal deregulation or federal legalization, where you could grow it in Maryland and process Maryland and bring it across the border? What are the solutions that people are talking about? Because as there's this ramp up or desired ramp up of the medical program in DC and hopefully eventually a recreational program, you need to be able to grow it and process it somewhat locally in the city, which in 70 square miles is really hard.
Absolutely. So our regulatory agency, ABCA, knows this is a problem. People have been telling them this, and they're trying to find a solution. And the first thing that they passed recently was to actually extend the cultivation licenses. So or the conditional cultivation and manufacture licenses. So they said, you guys are going to get another 12 months. But we talked to applicants that said, if nothing changes, another 12 months isn't going to make my...
It's just 12 more months of looking.
Right. I know the places that are available, and I know that the terms that they're available for are not an option for me. And I don't see any other places coming open. They also expanded the zoning. So they did some changes. We were promised, multiple people were promised that there were going to be radical zoning changes, because the other issue is it's not just industrial zoning. It's also that a cannabis business can't be very close to a school. And you'd be very surprised where charter private schools end up in DC. Again, because we don't have a lot of space. We don't have a lot of places that businesses or any of these things can be located, right? So because of that, they opened up some zones. And we were thinking it was going to be a lot more than it actually was. And what they ended up doing was opening some of the office buildings spaces to for smaller manufacturers, so this is for the ones that are smaller, they opened up some office buildings that would be in downtown and said you can locate here. However, the same issue with the banking. A lot of those office buildings are owned by national, real estate conglomerates, and we're looking at the same problems. A lot of people don't want to be located in those areas, or they're going to face really high rent as well still. So there have been a few more. We talked to some lawyers who are working with clients, and they said that their clients were able to find some spaces successfully after May. There had been no new manufacturers or cultivators that have moved at all in the licensing. We have multiple stages, right? So they hadn't moved at all. After this zoning change happened in May, we had a couple trickle in, which led to our 5% rate of licensees that were conditional that have moved through the process at all at any higher stage. But that's all that's changed. And we talked to multiple people that said the zoning change is not enough to fix this issue. So we have a lot of people with other creative ideas that think that there should be outdoor growing space, that think that, we can change some of these issues with being close to a school. But there's a problem that even if we open up small micro grows and basements and residential areas, it's very difficult to get that passed through council. But to say we were able to open up, residential areas to have small grows or small manufacturing areas, we don't know if that would work, if that would be good enough to provide. Right. Yeah. We did talk to a current cultivator that's one of our bigger cultivators in the city. And he said that he doesn't think there is an issue. He said that we have illicit operators who are refusing to go over to the legal market that are pointing to a lack of flower being available as a reason to kind of dig in their heels. And he said that the flower that they have on surplus and in their surplus reserves, and that the other cultivators, which there's only about 5 others, will actually support the market as other people get up and going. He is kind of alone in that belief, though. Everyone else is kind of worried about this as well. And then we just have also, a concern that if there's only a few cultivators to shop at for these dispensaries, that the market is just going to be looking at a lack of diverse products, right? So even if these cultivators are growing product really well, people want a lot of diversity when they go into dispensary. They want to try stuff from different growers, and any market that's healthy needs that type of creativity and competition to be able to grow and innovate, right?
It seems this is why I like talking to you on each week, because there are unique things that are happening in DC, which I think is the microcosm of some things that are happening in other markets, but it's just all layered on DC in a really unique way, which is both compelling from a news perspective, but also from an industry perspective to keep an eye on. And it's really good reporting by you, LJ, because other than you, it's not like there's a lot of people keeping an eye on the day-to-day of what's happening in DC. But again, DC is poised to be an interesting and big market. It is a medium-sized city, but also confined, but also tourism through the roof. It is the backyard of the federal government, which has interesting implications, but also from a consumer perspective. I believe a lot of those federal employees who live in DC are cannabis consumers, and so they have outsized sway in what their bosses think about the issue.
It's a stressful job, we've heard, to be part of the federal government. So
right. So you could use a nice release. I just feel like they should grow on the roofs of the the Smithsonian's and the federal buildings downtown, maybe on the lawn of the Capitol, the south lawn of the White House.
The mall is miles long. So if we could just turn the mall, the National Mall, into a big cannabis farm, I think we'd have no problems, Jay.
It makes me so imagine, this is so far fetched, but imagine remember Michelle Obama had a garden in the south lawn? Imagine cannabis plants on the south lawn of the White House. Maybe someday, you and I probably won't live long enough to see it, but maybe someday a home grow at the White House. That would be.
Maybe if the empire falls, there will be some cannabis.
It would actually be a great, especially DC-based brand called South Lawn. It would be really a cool cannabis brand.
I agree. I don't know if the presidents would support. There's a strain that was named after Kamala Harris, and I think one of the late night talk show hosts asked her if she knew that, and she of course said no. And then he asked her if she would smoke it, she said no, which is not surprising given her track record. Yeah, she tries to pretend to be cool, but she threw a lot of people in.
She did. When cannabis was legalized in Canada, someone came out with a Justin Trudeau. That was like
nice.
Yeah. Well, LJ, I appreciate the reporting. I appreciate the story. Thank you for sharing with us in our newsletter today and on Cultivated Live today. We'll see you next week. But thanks for the good reporting, and we'll connect with you next week.
Thanks, Jay. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. Thanks,
everybody. Have a good and safe weekend. Buy cannabis at your local dispensary. We'll be back here Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Find everything we do at cultivated.news. Again, you're LJ Dawson, the editor-in-chief at the Outlaw Report. I'm Jay Rosenthal with Cultivated Media. Everybody have a good weekend.